Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, The Transition to IATF 16949-2016. In today's webinar, we'll be reviewing a history of how the standard came to be and begin our overview of the new and revised requirements, as well as some deleted requirements. My name is Shannon Craddock, and I'm the Programs and Accreditations Manager here at PJR, and I will be today's presenter. The slides that I will be reviewing are those of the AIAG and were originally presented by managers at the IAOB and representatives from some of the IATF OEMs. And the original delivery of this presentation is September 2016. So as we go through it, we'll see some things that are no longer applicable as time has passed since that date. In order to ensure sound quality, all participants have been muted. I'll be more than happy to field questions at the end of the lecture portion of today's presentation. Please type your questions into the question feature, and I'll answer as many of these as possible at the conclusion of the presentation. In addition, a copy of today's slides, as well as a recording of today's presentation, will be available for download from our website at www.pjr.com. So the first slide is a schematic showing how the automotive certification scheme works. You have the IATF member OEMs, including Ford, GM, Daimler, BMW, etc., as well as some of the national associations. And many of you are probably familiar with IAG in the United States. There are 5 global oversight offices. PJR is recognized by the IAOB, actually just a few miles from us here in Michigan. And then the global oversight training providers, which also happen to be the AIAG in the United States. The IATF database is used by the oversight offices and IATF membership to get information about audits, non-conformity data, audit and certificate dates, and who the audit team members were. Looking at the distribution of certificates, we're talking ISO TS 16949 certificates at this point. You will see that over 2/3 are in the Asia Pacific region, most of those being in China and India. North America actually has just under 10%. And then a distribution as of the 31st of August 2016 of over 66,000 automotive certificates. You'll see that China has almost 28,000 of those. Other countries with a large number of certificates are Korea and India. You'll also see a lot of certificates in Germany, the United States. This slide shows the 5 oversight offices, the number of certification bodies that are under the purview of that oversight office, and the number of certificates that those certification bodies issue. So the largest would be the IAOB, which is responsible for 20 CBs and about 21,000 certificates. And VDA QMC in Germany, which is a smaller number of CBs, but some of these are larger CBs with almost 28,000 certificates. So let's talk about the discipline method that led to the creation of IATF 16949. Revision work first began well over now 2.5 years ago and was completed in August 2016. And the team employed a discipline 5-phase approach to revising ISO TS 16949 into IATF 16949. There was the pre-plan phase, analyze, build, validate, and deploy. There was a large team working on this project consisting of 17 global partners from 14 organizations, including IATF OEMs, the oversight offices, and others. This resulted in the new standard IATF 16949-2016, and it follows the same high-level structure of ISO 9001-2015. So it's got 10 sections as opposed to the 8 in ISO TS 16949. Very important point here. If you're looking at Facebook or checking your email, please tune in. IATF 16949 must be used in conjunction with ISO 9001-2015. This means that there's two separate documents, the IATF standard and ISO 9001-2015, that have to be used in order to have all the requirements, in order to get an understanding of all the requirements that you have to meet. You cannot just simply implement the requirements of IATF 16949 alone. The next bullet point reviews the number of shalls in IATF 16949 as well as shoulds, and offers a comparison to 16949. IATF created a transition plan and initially communicated it in April 2016, and then it was further revised in August 2016. To kick things off, the International Automotive Task Force, or the IATF, launched a survey in early June 2015, soliciting feedback from over 2,000 key stakeholders, including OEMs and lower-level suppliers, the certification bodies, the witness auditors, and those are the folks that follow certification body auditors around to gather information on their performance, as well as the performance of the certification body, subject matter experts, and the 5 oversight offices. Over 1,700 comments were received for consideration for updating. Additionally, the IATF conducted a face-to-face review of the draft in Rome in April 2016 with certification bodies and supplier representatives. We talked in the previous slide that about 1,700 comments were received. Most of these came from suppliers as opposed to OEMs, so 63% to about 9%. A next large responding group is the certification bodies. Really important point here, and while this point is emphasized, this has always been the intent of ISO TS 16949 as well. The IATF OEMs and the global oversight members look at the linkage between certification and the organization's quality performance. So they believe there should be a link here, and only those companies with on-time, on-quality performance should be certified. In order to accomplish this, there needs to be an increased focus on operational performance and customer feedback. And this is sought through a review of customer scorecards or metrics. The IATF 16949 standard contains many of the customer-specific requirements right in it. And the OEMs are raising the bar regarding expectations for audits to reflect systemic weaknesses that affect the supplier or client's performance. So they want meaningful findings that are really going to help organizations achieve that on-time, on-quality performance, more than the low-hanging fruit, with the goal being to prevent problems before they occur. The IATF felt it was important to keep everybody updated as to what was going on with revisions to the standard. So on IATFglobaloversight.org, there's information about the revision process, and it's available right on that homepage there. Okay, so let's get into the standard itself. You'll see anything with a reddish-orange star is a new requirement. A yellow or gold star represents a modified requirement, and a blue requirement is a carryover. Section 431, determining the scope of the quality management system supplemental. And to be clear, we are only going to be reviewing the changes to IATF 16949 in this presentation. PGR has a number of, I think, world-class webinars on the changes to ISO 9001 2015 conducted by PGR expert Joe Krolikowski. I encourage you to tune into those webinars as well in order to get a full understanding of all the requirements and their intent that you will have to meet in order to be IATF 16949 2016 certified. So some of these requirements were originally included in sections 1.1 and 1.2 of TS 16949, and they've moved to section 4, which is now normative. The requirement relating to supporting functions was revised to ensure that supporting functions not only address the need to include support functions in the audit, but to also to ensure that they're included in the scope of the QMS. So not really a change here. The supporting functions need to be included in the audit, and they need to be included in the organization's scope. Any exclusion sought for design and development, which is now in section 8.3, has to be preserved as documented information. Again, when there was the quality manual requirement, you had to preserve that as a documented requirement as part of your quality manual. Section 432, customer-specific requirements. Even though in TS 16949, the need to fulfill and satisfy customer-specific requirements was already mentioned numerous times, and that was the intent, the theme of the document. In IATF, this requirement specifically addresses the need to evaluate customer-specific requirements and include them, where applicable, in the organization's quality management system. So what this means is that the supplier needs some sort of process to evaluate each customer-specific requirement and determine exactly how and where it applies to their organization's QMS. So systematically, as an organization, you need to be going through all the requirements and figuring out where and how they apply. (4411) Conformance of products and processes. This new requirement came as a result of IATF survey feedback, and its goal is to ensure the following: that the supplier or organization is responsible for the conformity of outsourced processes, and that all products and processes meet all applicable requirements and expectations of interested parties. And to ensure conformance with all products and processes, including those that are outsourced, the organization needs to take a proactive approach to assess and address risks and not rely on inspection only. What are they doing to manage that outsourced process to ensure its success? Requiring certification, doing second-party audits, etc. Section 4412 is a lengthy and important section on product safety. And it has enhanced requirements that address current and emerging issues in the automotive industry relating to product and process safety. And by God, there's a lot of them. And this section was added to address some of the issues that we're seeing with Takata and General Motors, amongst other suppliers, not necessarily to single them out. Organizations are required to have documented processes to manage product safety related products and processes. Documented process could mean a lot of things. It could mean a procedure. It could mean a flow chart. It could mean a computer program. It could mean FMEAs, a lot of different tools, but there has to be something in writing, a documented process. Some of the things required in the product safety requirement includes identification of statutory requirements, identifying and controlling product safety related characteristics, during design and at the point of manufacture, defining responsibilities and escalation process, reaction plans, ensuring the necessary flow of information, special approvals for FEMAs and control plans, traceability, and cascading requirements throughout the supply chain. All of these are part of a robust product safety process that, again, needs to be documented. 5111 set of new requirements. ISO 9001-2015 expanded the ISO 9001-2008 concept of management responsibility into a set of leadership behaviors to ensure an effective QMS. What's meant by leadership behavior? Management needs to be actively involved in taking appropriate actions based on the data reviewed. IATF has new requirements for an anti-bribery policy, an employee code of conduct, and an ethics escalation policy to address increasing market and governmental expectations for improved integrity in social and environmental manners in the automotive industry. So many larger companies may already have an anti-bribery policy, a code of conduct, ethics escalation, or whistleblower policy as part of their employee handbook. If you do not, these need to be documented. And again, the intent of these requirements is an implication of responsibility and empowerment, more importantly, at all levels and functions within the organization to follow an ethical approach and report any observed unethical behavior without fear of reprisal. (5112) is a revised requirement on process effectiveness and efficiency. So TS 16949 back in section 511 did have a requirement for the organization to review their processes to ensure effectiveness and efficiency. This requirement has been strengthened to ensure that the results of process review activities will now be included in management review. And to be quite honest, I don't know a lot of companies that weren't using their management review to review the results of processes, process performance. Most organizations did use their management review for this. And these process review activities need to include evaluation methods and, as a result, implement improvements. And the results of these steps need to be an input to the management review process. Top management is performing a review of the process-specific reviews performed by the process owners. So the way this works, data are collected, they're pulled together and reviewed by the process owners, and then the results of those reviews by the process owners are elevated to management review for review by senior leadership. And that's where they apply those leadership behaviors to take appropriate actions based on the results. (5113) process owners. 16949 addressed management responsibility and authority, but it didn't explicitly mention that management ensure process owners understand their roles and are competent. IATF has adopted the requirement to ensure that management understand this expectation by specifically identifying process owners and ensuring they can perform their assigned roles. And this requirement recognizes that process owners have both the responsibility and authority for activities and the results of the processes that they manage. So somehow it needs to be clear to a third-party auditor that process owners have been clearly identified and that they understand their roles and are competent to perform these roles. So this involves asking senior leadership who are the process owners, and then moving down to interview those process owners to make sure that they understand their role. 531, organizational roles, responsibilities, and authorities. Again, this requirement was part of TS 16949, but based on survey feedback, the IATF adopted some modifications to address the need to document assigned personnel responsibilities and authorities. It's here that we have a clarification that the goal is not just to address customer requirements, but also to meet customer requirements fully. So what we need to do is document the personnel involved in capacity analysis, logistics information, scorecards, and customer portals. So it's very clear who's responsible for each of these activities, which involves an interface with the customer. (532) responsibility and authority for product requirements and corrective actions. Again, based on survey feedback, the IATF adopted some enhancements to requirements that were initially included in TS 16949. And these make top management responsible for ensuring conformity to product requirements and that corrective actions are taken. TS 16949 clarifies there must be a process to inform those with the authority and responsibility for corrective action in order that they ensure a non-conforming product is identified, contained, and not shipped to the customer. This implies that assigned personnel must always be available to take prompt action to prevent release. This is especially important if the organization has more than one shift, for example. Okay, moving on to section 6, 6121, risk analysis. The need to identify, analyze, and consider actual and potential risks was covered in the preventive action section of ISO TS 16949. The IATF has adopted additional requirements for risk analysis, recognizing the ongoing need to analyze and respond to risk and have suppliers, organizations consider specific risks associated with the automotive industry. The organizations need to periodically review lessons learned from product recalls, product audits, field returns and repairs, complaints, scraps, and rework, and implement action plans in light of these lessons. The effectiveness of these actions should be evaluated and actions integrated into the organization's QMS. So again, we've got leadership reacting to the information gathered, integrating the improvements into the organization's QMS through their leadership behavior. 6122 is a requirement for preventive action. Now, interestingly, this requirement is missing from ISO 9001:2015. The requirement has been enhanced, going from TS 16949 to IATF 16949. Organizations need to implement a process to lessen the impact of negative effects of risk, appropriate to the severity of potential issues. And such a process would include these sound steps: identifying the risk, documenting lessons learned, identifying and reviewing similar processes where the nonconformity could occur, and applying lessons learned to prevent such potential occurrence. Section 6123 is a greatly enhanced section on contingency plans. A lot of new requirements here. And in my experience, I found in a lot of organizations, contingency plans are an afterthought that really only get pulled off the shelf when it's time for the audit. So this greatly expanded section ensures the organization defines and prepares contingency plans that include a notification process to the customer or any other interested parties. An identification of interested parties is an ISO 9001:2015 concept that's not covered in today's presentation. that will be covered in one of PGR's ISO 9001 2015 webinars conducted by Joe Krolikowski. The first step is for the organization to take a systematic approach to identify and evaluate risk for all manufacturing processes, giving particular attention to external risk, maybe from outsourced processes. Contingency plans then need to be developed for any of the outlined risks, including interruption of externally provided products, processes, and services, recurring natural disasters, fire, or infrastructure-related disruptions. Customer notification should be a mandatory step in any contingency plan, unless there's no risk to deliver non-conforming product or affect on-time delivery. (6221) Quality objectives and planning to achieve them. ISO TS 16949 included the importance of addressing customer expectations in the note to section 5411. In IATF 16949, there's been an enhancement of this requirement, and that organizations are now required to do this at all levels throughout the organization. In ensuring quality objectives meet customer requirements, the objectives need to consider customer targets. So if your customer has a target of 100% on time on quality performance, your internal quality objectives need to reflect that. You should not have on-time delivery targets of 95%. Your personnel should be aware of and committed to achieving these objectives in line with customer requirements. And quality objectives and performance targets should be periodically reviewed for adequacy on at least an annual basis. Section 7131, Plant Facility and Equipment Planning. This section has been updated to include an increased focus on risk identification and risk mitigation, evaluating manufacturing feasibility, reevaluating changes in processes, and the inclusion of on-site supplier activities. And the idea is that many operational risks can be avoided by applying risk-based thinking during planning activities, extending to optimizing material flow and value-added use of floor space. A capacity planning evaluation that occurs during manufacturing feasibility assessments must consider customer contracted production rates and volumes, not only current ones. This requirement's a carryover. 7141, the organization has to maintain its premises in a state of order, cleanliness, and repair that makes sense for the type of manufacturing operation it is. Section 71511, Measurement System Analysis. There's a new requirement that records are now required for customer acceptance of alternative methods. So let's take a look at this in the standard in 71511. So if you're going to do any type of MSA that is outside of the ordinary, it's an alternative method, you have to maintain record of customer acceptance. Seven 71521, calibration verification records. This is an enhancement of requirements related to records and record retention requirements, and it makes it clear that the scope of this includes software installed on employee-owned or customer-owned equipment. Here we have another requirement for a documented process, and this could be a lot of things. This could be a flow chart, a spreadsheet, a computer program, a procedure, a schematic. A documented process is required to manage calibration verification records in order to provide evidence of conformity, and this includes any on-site supplier-owned equipment. And any verification activities you're doing need to consider applicable internal, customer, legislative, and regulatory requirements in order to establish approval criteria. So your approval criteria should be set based on all of those requirements. (71532) requirements related to an external laboratory. The organization can conduct second-party assessments of a laboratory, but it requires customer approval of the assessment method used, including the assessors that are going to be assigned. Surely a much easier way to meet this requirement is for the organization to be third-party accredited to ISO 17025, but you may have some smaller laboratories where this isn't feasible. Also, a clarification within this requirement that internal laboratory requirements apply even when the calibration is performed by the equipment manufacturer, and that use of calibration services may be subject to government regulatory confirmation. Section 721 has requirements on competence for employees. There's an addition to the requirement for awareness by employees, which includes the employee's knowledge of the quality policy, quality objectives, their personal contribution to the QMS, benefits of improved performance, and implications of not conforming with quality management system requirements. So this awareness needs to include all employees within the organization. It also emphasizes customer requirements for on-the-job training and not just quality requirements. So customer requirements, anything flowed down by your customers and supplier quality manuals, terms and conditions documents, etc., needs to be incorporated into this awareness training. You'll note here that the term documented process is used rather than procedure, implying that these activities need to be managed through a PDCA cycle and not just merely performed in accordance with the procedure. (722) focuses on the job training. Emphasis here is on meeting customer requirements, including requirements of interested parties. The level of education and complexity of the task needs to be considered when determining how in-depth the OJT is, and this training needs to include contract or agency personnel and convey the consequences of nonconformity to customer requirements to all personnel whose work affects quality. Essentially, folks need to understand what happens when things go wrong and how that affects interested parties and customers downstream of the process. 723 is a greatly enhanced section relating to internal auditor competency, which will hopefully lead to a more robust internal audit process. First, organizations need to establish a documented process that considers the competencies required. takes actions to address any deficiencies organizations' internal auditors have relative to these competencies, and addresses the effectiveness of actions taken. And there also is a requirement to record a list or maintain a list of qualified auditors. There are different requirements for quality management system auditors, those doing manufacturing process audits and those doing product audits. So you need to define in your documented process different requirements for each of the 3 types of auditors. Second party auditor competency. This is a new section based on the new requirement for second party audits. They need to be properly qualified to conduct second party audits. And again, customer specific requirements are going to be a main focus of these audits. The same core competencies applying the internal auditors should at minimum also apply to second party auditors. (731) Awareness Supplemental. The organization has to maintain documented information. That's not necessarily clear in the slide. I'm grabbing this from the standard to demonstrate that all employees are aware of their impact on product quality, customer specific requirements, and risks involved for the customer with non-conforming product. So somehow organizations need to maintain documented information or records to prove that their employees are aware of how they impact quality. Training records may suffice to meet this requirement. A carryover requirement, employee motivation and empowerment, is now in 732. There's now a requirement for maintaining a documented process for employee motivation and empowerment instead of simply having a process. So the process you use now has to be documented. Section 7511 talks about quality management system documentation. IATF 16949 retains the quality manual requirement that is not in ISO 9001 2015. So ISO 9001 2015 got rid of the requirement for a quality manual. IATF brings it back. The quality manual, however, can be one main document or a series of multiple documents that can be either hard copy or electronic, so it can be in multiple places. This section also requires that the organization's processes and their interactions are documented as part of the QMS. Formerly, this used to be part of the quality manual. And the quality manual needs to document where in the organization's QMS customer-specific requirements are addressed. This is usually accomplished through some type of matrix. And in fact, I haven't really seen it any other way. So earlier we talked about the organization identifying all customer-specific requirements and getting their arms around them. 7511 now tells you that as part of your quality manual, you need to show what these customer-specific requirements are and where in your management system you meet them. Section 75321. These are requirements for a record retention process. It needs to be defined and documented, including the organization's record retention requirements. Included in the scope of this are production part approvals, tooling records, product and process design records, POs, contracts amendments, etc. And if there's no customer or regulatory retention period for these types of records, the length of time that the product is active for production and service requirements, plus 1 calendar year, should be applied. Requirement in 75322 for engineering specifications. You're going to see some of the same things you saw in TS 16949 with a review of changes being done with 10 working days of receipt of notification. But there's also a requirement for a documented process here. The section also clarifies product design changes and a product realization process changes and the alignment to related sections. Okay, that concludes today's prepared section. We've covered now sections 4, 5, 6, and 7, and the remaining 2 webinars will cover sections 8, 9, and 10. We'll get into some of the media requirements in these sections. I will now open the floor up to any questions that you may have. Please type them into the question feature, as all participants have been muted to ensure sound quality, and I'll attempt to mention as many of these as I can. Okay, we're starting to get some questions coming in. Bear with me as I go through these. Chris, no, PGR will not provide a list that tells you what procedures are required. And in fact, you're not going to see the word procedure in ISO 9001:2015 or IATF 16949. You need to do this analysis yourself. And again, you're going to see documented processes or documented information being required. Now, what PGR will do if your organization is a customer of PGR, as part of the planning process, as your audit's getting scheduled and we're making sure that you're ready to be audited, one of our documents does ask for all the documented procedures or documented processes and documented information that's required in both standards. So we could provide that to you in advance of when we would normally provide that. That's not a problem. Simply contact your PGR scheduler for that document, Chris. The AIAG also has a great gap analysis tool available at www.aiag.org that you can use to assess your preparedness for IATF 16949. Again, folks, type your questions into the question interface in GoToWebinar, and I'll attempt to answer as many of these as I can. We'll wait a few more minutes to see if any other questions come in. Again, folks, You'll be able to download a copy of today's slides and listen to a playback within 24 to 48 hours after today's webinar at www.pjr.com. Getting a question on 441 in the standard, resource planning requirements. So the reason that I didn't touch on this, Stephanie, is this is a 9001-2015 requirement only. We won't be touching on that in today's presentation. The additive requirement for IATF 16949 is 4411. The organization has to ensure conformance of all products and processes, including service parts, and those that are outsourced to all applicable customer, statutory, and regulatory requirements. Essentially, this goes without saying. They're making it very explicit. This has always been the intent, conforming product, also relating to anything that's outsourced. I hope that addresses your question. Yes, Joanne, you'll be able to download copies of the slides and eventually print these out. Give us 24 to 48 hours to get the information up on our website, www.pjr.com. It's also here where you can access information on upcoming webinars. Great question from Mr. Taylor. Previously, the MR was held responsible for the success of the management system and essentially passing audits. And yes, John, this has shifted. ISO 9001-2015 in particular makes it very clear that top management needs to be involved. It's not just the MR's job. In fact, you're not going to see the term management representative any longer. Senior leadership needs to be involved, and they need to be exhibiting leadership behaviors to direct the quality management system. And in fact, in the course of all PJR audits, there's a section in our audit report template that prompts an interview with top leadership at the organization, whomever that is. It may be a CEO, it may be a plant manager, and they need to be able to talk as to where the quality management system stands. And if it's not currently in a condition of on-time, on-quality performance, what's being done about it? And this interview isn't conducted with the MR if the organization still has one, it's with senior leadership. Non-conformities will be written if they're not well-versed in the performance of the quality management system. Folks, we'll wait just one more minute to see if any other questions come in. Okay, that appears to be it. I thank you for your time today, and I look forward to speaking with you in the next 2 weeks as we go through the remaining changes in IATF 16949. Thank you.